Excellences, Mesdames et Messieurs, bonjour à tous et à toutes. Donc, je vais parler en français, si vous avez besoin de la traduction. Do you need it also? I can give you mine. Kennedy, do you need it? We would like to make sure that all our audience is participating with us. Perfect. Donc bonjour à tous et à tous. C'est un honneur encore une fois pour moi de vous accueillir à ce panel consacré à l'un des enjeux les plus décisifs de notre siècle, l'eau, non pas comme ressource, mais comme fondement de souveraineté, de sécurité et de prospérité durable. Nous ne parlons pas d'un futur hypothétique, nous parlons de notre survie collective, de notre capacité à nourrir nos populations, à soutenir nos économies et à protéger nos territoires dans un climat profondément instable. Les projections sont claires. D'ici 2050, plus d'1 milliard de personnes pourraient faire face à une pénurie sévère. Alors que les tensions hydriques s'aggravent sur tous les continents, l'Afrique en est l'exemple le plus frappant. Un continent riche en potentiel, mais où la vulnérabilité hydrique menace l'agriculture, l'énergie, l'industrie et parfois même la cohésion sociale. Et pourtant, cette fragilité porte en elle une opportunité majeure, car l'eau n'est pas seulement un risque, elle est un moteur de transformation. Lorsque les pays investissent dans les infrastructures intelligentes, le dessalement, l'irrigation et de précision, la réutilisation des eaux usées, les technologies digitales et une gouvernance inclusive, ils créent bien plus que des réseaux. Ils construisent de la résilience, de la valeur et une indépendance stratégique. Mais aucun acteur ne peut réussir seul. La souveraineté hydrique nécessite une coalition. États visionnaires, secteur privé innovant, centres de recherche, société civile organisée et finances internationales. Elle exige aussi une nouvelle culture, celle de l'efficacité, de la sobriété et de la valorisation socio-économique de chaque goutte. Aujourd'hui, nous avons la chance d'être entourés d'experts, d'investisseurs et de décideurs de haut niveau qui portent déjà cette transformation. Ils nous aident à passer d'une logique de réaction à une stratégie durable où l'eau devient un garant de sécurité et un vecteur de prospérité. Mesdames et messieurs, le temps du constat est passé. Le temps est à l'investissement, à l'innovation et au courage collectif. Ouvrant cette conversation essentielle. Je voudrais commencer avec Dr. Andreas Kramer. You are the founder and director of Emeritus of Ecologic Institutes, a very renowned expertise. Drawing on your work on environmental governance and integrated water management, what international lessons could help African countries position water as a strategic pillar of sovereignty?
Thank you. If you ask a German engineer to talk about water, you get one perspective. If you ask a professor that is taught in America, you get another perspective, and the second one is much longer. I'll try to keep the middle ground. The first thing, when we think about water and we think about sovereignty, we think about security, it is worth remembering that historically, states have developed as a result of water management challenges. Statecraft was born in water. You can look at the oldest text, the Codex Hammurabi, which establishes no-fault liability for somebody redirecting water in the wrong way. The victim, the one whose field is not irrigated, gets compensated. It's actually written there how much they get. And it doesn't matter if you were at fault, whether you did it on purpose or whatever else, it's clear what you have to pay. You can see in that already the link between water and the land and food security. And you can see that there is a confluence of legal thinking, liability, no-fault liability in our modern language, but it's combined also with an assessment of the economic value, what is considered fair. And in actual fact, the combination of the two makes it unnecessary to go to court because everybody knows how much has to be paid if that happens. And you find many such things in other parts of the world. Water management has given us not only geometry, but also mathematics, algebra. All this came because it had to be developed. So I think that when we talk about sovereignty and statehood, we should remember that the culture, human culture, came out of the separation of water and land, whether that is drainage in some areas, or whether that is irrigation in other areas, or the change between the two. Sometimes you irrigate, sometimes you drain, depending on what is needed. The art of choosing the right crops for the soil, for the water, for the weather, and building a system that is resilient. Over the past, let's say, 80 years or so, we've had development in agriculture that was emphasizing efficiency. The mechanized plow, we plow the soil, we expose the soil to the sunlight, to the wind, to the rain when it falls. If it's torrential, it will wash away. And as a consequence, we are actually losing fertile land. And we have created that in the idea that the larger the plots of land and the bigger the machines are that you do, and the more standardized the seeds are, the more efficient the whole thing works. But if efficiency is the enemy of resilience, and historically in traditional cultures, it's resilience, the diversity of crops, the security. If one type of beans fails, you have another type of bean. In Mexico, the farmers there that grow maize, corn, they set aside 10% of their land for maintaining wild varieties of maize, of corn, so that they always know which one is best suited for their land, and if there is a change in the weather patterns, they can see in the wild patch which one is doing well, and that is the one that they will use as seed next year when they think that they... Those are things that I think we need to remember, that building culture comes from that separation. And I say that as a German because we have a word called Kulturbau, and that is actually irrigation and drainage, and that is where culture comes from. You can translate that from the countryside into the cities. Our cities today can only survive because we supply them with good water, and if the water in pipes is not good enough, then we use water in bottles. And if we think the water in pipes is not good enough, we are using bottles anyway, even though we might not actually need that. More importantly, taking the wastewater with the sewage with the human waste, with the animal waste out of the city is vital. If that system fails, you have about 2 to 3 weeks before contagious diseases break out and the city will become uninhabitable. That is how important it is. At the same time, that infrastructure in the cities is the most expensive infrastructure there is. It is in the ground, it's out of sight and out of mind. But the cost of building sewage systems, taking the waste away, the cost of building sewage systems in cities costs more than all the other infrastructure systems combined. Water, electricity, gas, data cables, street lighting, whatever you want to have, all of that together is cheap compared to the cost of the sewage works, which are essential for our cities to survive. When we think, and this takes us back to the aspect of sovereignty, when we think about rivers, from a social perspective, the two banks of a river, they are actually a community. The people communicate. They take boats across, they trade across, they marry across, they transport ideas across. The military logic says a river is a great area to have a border, a defensive line. So the social aspect of rivers is cohesion, and the military aspect is separation. I find that interesting. But what rivers tell us is that sovereignty is not something that is linked to nation states. Sovereignty is always shared in a river basin, as it is if you have a groundwater reservoir. If you have an inland lake, the people living around that lake, no matter what the borders are, they're still a community because they're all depending on the same resource for fishing, for transport, for whatever. So it is worth looking at water and how it behaves in the natural environment in order to understand how best to define the space through which sovereignty is exercised, and you will find that it is always shared sovereignty. It's never absolute, it is always shared. It forces us to cooperate, which is why I regard water as a great inspiration and a driver of good relations and of peace, rather than a source of conflict. I know that there are people who run statistics of water-related conflicts, and a recent report has just come out from the Pacific Institute. Peter Gleich does good work with all the statistics, but it tells a story of conflict over water and attacking water infrastructure in war. Yes, that happens, but the underlying story is one of cooperation and peace building. Thank you.
I would like really to thank you. This is very inspiring, and this is very disruptive as an approach, because not only did you help us deconstruct also some of the prisms through which this issue is tackled today that are not exclusive and are not absolute. There are other relative views that can be more positive and also more conducive to solutions. But I'm also very happy that you brought out the history, and the history of water and its importance for humanity, and how human intelligence has been able to cope with it, with solutions and mechanisms, gives us a lot of hope, and gives us also a lot of incentives and encouragement to bring that intelligence again into building compromises. So thank you so much. And talking about it, you also reminded me of our own culture and history, because the old Moroccan Medina, or Arab also cities, they all had a fountain, and the public fountain that was open to everyone, enabling not only everyone to get water from it, but also to the travelers who would visit to get water from it, is also a form of manifestation of what you have seen, water as a factor of union, as a factor of sharing. So thank you very much for all this data and information and inspiration. I would like to, and it's always a pleasure, Dr. Kennedy. I would like now to give the floor to Dr. Kennedy. He's the founder and CEO of the African Business Information Bank. He's a leader in continental development finance and strategic investment for Africa's agricultural ecosystems. Dr. Kennedy, access to reliable data and financing remains one of Africa's greatest challenges. How can digital financial ecosystem, but also banking information and sharing information across the continent, reshape water sovereignty policies?
Thank you very much. I think that when you combine issues on data sovereignty and water sovereignty, then you understand the foundations for, let's say, future transformations of countries like Africa. Just like Professor Kramer actually said, it is very important for us to understand that despite the fact that there is a dilemma, most African countries in the Congo Basin, we have water everywhere. And the foundations of this water is getting this water where it's needed. Having water itself, water surplus means nothing. The engineering doesn't come by having water, but getting water to where it's needed and for the purpose. First of all, for human. And if you can't get this water at the right quantity, at the right time, so you need the quantity, the right time, and the right quality, because water that gets for agricultural purposes is different from water that gets for human consumptions and industrial. But if you, so you need to understand this important information, the data, and then to build the water highway. So, you know, the water highway, just as Professor Kramer was saying, I'll look at a town like Lutherstadt-Wittenberg, where Martin Luther wrote 95 points against the Catholic Church, against the sales of indulgences in Wittenberg in Germany. Water was a fundamental issue during the Reformation period. So by giving the history of water highway, it matters a lot, and data matters a lot today. So if we do not have the right data in planning, in projecting, then it becomes very difficult for us to get water at the right time, and then we are building future conflicts. Most of the conflicts today, just like the researches he quoted, are showing that water is a foundation, but sometimes it's because politicians are short-sighted. They don't know, they don't have a long-term projected development, And if you look at a lot of countries in Central African sub-region, the government have resigned in providing water to people and allowing them, everybody just create boreholes everywhere, boreholes. So it's like the water highway is being confused. Everybody digs and puts water. It's just because they are overwhelmed. And that's where information comes in. The investment in water, in water, building water infrastructure, just like he said, it's very, very, very consuming. And sometimes attracting investors into that field. Because, you know, they say, if we get in building infrastructures to supply water, you can't stop it one day and say we don't sell if people don't pay for the water. Government has to subsidize, so the riskiness of providing and getting into the water business is so high. That is where trust comes in. You need to, the governments cannot do them alone. They need to create signal their to those who actually need it. But he raised something that is so fundamental, which is the governance systems. Water governance, I really enjoyed that because saying that water engineering has provided a lot of discovery that we use today in artificial intelligence, in mathematical science, and so on, is something that people do not understand. If you look at 4 years ago, the potential conflict between Egypt and Ethiopia, I mean, thank God they have normalized the relationship. It's just also because of water for 4 things. One, the Egyptians needed this water back end to be able to boost their long-term development strategy. On the other side, the Ethiopians needed a regulated water to build their future development strategies, and that's where diplomacy comes in. So how do we make it? And that's where we need to create spaces where emotions do not coordinate human interactions, but we need data and contract systems, because you need contract system for checks and balances. So yes, water sovereignty is very important. Just like if you do not do something, it's going to affect the long-term distribution, production and distributions of water. And that's where data plays a vital role. So we are in the crossroad of data sovereignty and water sovereignty. Morocco has proven in the last year in tapping water from the sea desalination. They has proven technology. A lot of technology has developed around this area. On the other side, they have also proven in water efficiency, in greenhouse agriculture, and other issues. And today, it will be very, very uncalled for to see that water do not get to the places that are needed. On the contrary, data scientists are now getting into the agricultural sector. If you talk to, Chris will share his own idea, where they are now using photovoltaic in making sure that the efficient use of water plays a vital role, and that's where data comes in. Data comes in to make sure that in drip irrigations, the exact quantity we need at what time. So we need to make sure that we create a sustainable infrastructures. We need to make sure that we invest not just on water highway. We need to make sure that money gets to those platforms and technologies, just like the information bank, which goes across different sectors. We spoke about other agricultural sector yesterday. We are talking about water, and we're talking about attracting investment. You see that information banking is a new banking model, but unfortunately, you can get investors to come in because it's a public good. It's a free good. Information, once it's there, everybody use it, and nobody wants to invest. But I think that information banking, somewhere in Africa, we have to take it as a human right. We need to have the right information. If states cannot do it, we need to figure out and create a mechanism where finances gets to those levels. So making it very short with your question, it's very important to get the right people that are acting in the field, get the right researchers, where are they? How do we learn from them in Morocco? Get the right investors like the LMD groups and others that are also making sure that if they bring out new technology for not just poisoning the water, because if we speak, the data we have today, we have seen the degree of cancer cases in many countries because of toxic use of chemicals in agricultural process, where the underground waters are poisoned, and the capacity of the states to monitor each farm is very small. So I think data plays a vital role, and data and water sovereignty must go together.
Thank you very much. I'm also very happy that you have mentioned finance and investments in that sector that is sometimes often seen as uncertain rather than an opportunity. It was my second question to you, so I'm happy that you anticipated it and answered it already. I know Dr. Kramer, you want to react. I will give you, of course, no? You were agreeing, okay. Absolutely. So I would like to, of course, to turn to Professor Christopher Scott Hedergren, adjunct professor of global food politics at Sciences Po Paris, former US Foreign Service officer, a renowned expert also in global food security, diplomacy, and agriculture governance. We had a beautiful conversation yesterday about food. Water is also food. So many people think about food and water as two challenges of our time, and I'm very happy that you can help us today with our audience present here and online understand the cross-sectorality between the three, politics, food, and water.
Lovely, thank you, Lamia. I wasn't anticipating being on this panel, so I'm very happy.
Thank you.
Because yesterday we spoke, I was on a panel about food and agriculture. Today on I ran the Secretariat of the Committee on World Food Security. Of course, water was constantly raised as an issue, but people don't talk about water security in the same way they talk about food security. And I'm not sure why, because I think, like the definition from 1996, that was a multilaterally negotiated definition. For the young students here, definitions are important. I'll come back to that. But food security and water security are both about access, right? It doesn't matter how much water might be in the system that Dr. Kramer talked about if you don't have access. First the availability, then the access, then the stability, and then the utilization. Dirty water is not going to do you very much good if that's all you have. That on top of sustainability and the agency, which is a new term of art for food security, but all of these apply exactly to water security. So I think it probably doesn't do us a lot of good to stovepipe and talk about these topics in silos. In fact, what I think is helpful, and I think is the future for development, the future for African food security and water security and energy security, is approaching these three things as a triangle: food, energy, and water. And what I had a chance to discuss yesterday and this morning was something I'm working on with a group, an NGO I started called the Consortium for Sustainable Agrivoltaics. And the idea, for those who don't know what agrivoltaics is about, you can go to the UM6P campus in Ben Garir, where I was on Wednesday, and see it in action. So young people just like you are being trained on how to make this technology a reality. And it's making solar panels and food production and water conservation work together in that triangle. So solar panels are now raised above the land. Food production is done. It can be crops, it can be fodder, it can be livestock, it can be cows, chickens, sheep, fish ponds. And the energy that is produced for a farmer, so there's now a dual income stream. You have the solar energy for production on the farm or for producing onto the grid, you have more food production, you have food that is more sustainable because you're using less water. The crops that are typically grown under solar panels are more productive, they're healthier, they even taste better. So this to me is the way that policymakers, business people, bankers, researchers, students, farmers, this is the way we should be thinking about development going forward. We see the numbers of food insecure going up. We know 70% of all the fresh water in the world is already used for agriculture. That number is going up. Dr. Kramer can confirm that statistic. But I think we need to be thinking differently, right? Innovation is not only technology. Innovation is taking ideas and thinking differently. How we govern, how we do our banking, how we do our farming, how we educate the young generation. We all need to be thinking out of the box, thinking differently, and thinking of this nexus of food, energy, and water. Let me start with that. Thank you, Lamia.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. It really sets our perspective and our conceptual understanding and also the current dynamics. And I was about to ask you about the example. So I'm very happy you provided it to our audience because you showed me the pictures yesterday. And it's a live example of multi-stakeholder solutions that work and that are sustainable and innovative. And I believe in inclusion, and students especially and academia can bring important added value to policy making and private sector as well. And it's also a perfect transition because Dr. Kramer, I wanted also to ask you, based on your expertise and the amazing work you are doing with the Emeritus of Ecologic Institute, based on this experience, how can collaboration between public institutions, scientific bodies, and private actors accelerate the adoption of innovative water solutions, particularly in vulnerable regions?
Thank you. I think that Tumenta Kennedy has already explained that. It always starts with information, knowing what is there, how much rain falls, where it collects, where the rivers form, where the groundwater forms, where the lakes form, what the rivers do throughout the year, and what that means for wildlife, which is important for the ecosystem integrity. If you only have managed agricultural systems and no natural systems anymore, your landscape is not resilient. It will eventually cause trouble. It took the Americans, after the invention of the mechanical plow and the tractor, about 60 years to lose their fertile soil, which was about that thick, and in 60 years they ended up with a dust bowl. That is what happens if you do not respect the natural laws, the requirements. So I think it is important to understand that, and out of those data, and I fully agree with you, you need that knowledge basis. And the knowledge basis needs to be as neutral and as politically non-contested as possible. And that is something that is important in our democratic societies, also in other societies, is the people who provide that knowledge base should have that as their job and only as their job. They should not have other functions as well. They're all human beings, they all have opinions, and they all have the vote if they live in a democracy. But they are primarily scientists and people who are civil servants who collect the data for the benefit of the public. That's the basis for planning. And planning is not abstract. Planning is something that takes place concretely. You produce maps. You understand what is where, what humans want, what uses are there, what uses there could be in the future when you want to think about investment. And then you develop scenarios and say, can this work? What happens if we have a 5-year drought? Do we have enough capacity? Does it make sense to plant trees here if you have occasional drought and it kills trees? It's one thing to have dried up tomatoes in the field to having avocado trees die because it doesn't rain in 2 years. So depending on what you want to do, you need different decisions. And then those decisions should be based on a good analysis and good scenarios, and then you invest. And you made the point, yes, this is infrastructure. I'm so pleased that the engineers have something to do here. And yes, you can transfer water from one region to another. You can put it behind a dam and store it from the rainy part of the year for the summer. You can do all sorts of things through engineering. And you do need, and you said that right, you do need the framework in place for the capital to be mobilized in order to put that infrastructure, that investment in place. And that means that you must have enforcement of contracts, political stability, so that the dividends can be earned from the investment that you make. If you don't have that in place, then it only leaves government agencies doing the investment. Yes, the United States of America, through the Army Corps of Engineers and the reclamation, they have built lots of infrastructure where private sector only came in the form of construction companies, not as financiers and not as owners of the dams or of the canals or whatever else. It was government. You can do that, but you did that at a time when government still had the power to tax, and increasingly governments don't have the power to tax anymore. Now the final thing is you need to operate, and you need to operate those systems in a fair way, so that it produces not only prosperity in the abstract, but that it is also has positive regenerational effects. And there was one thing that I wanted to bring up to Mentor. You said you can turn the water off. No. As a public health expert, I would tell you, you can turn the water off, but you should turn it back on again after you made your point, because if you cut off the water to one house in a town, you risk having an infection emerging from that house and affecting the neighbors. The neighbors of that house will not want that house to become the source of infection. So, as I said, our cities are so dense today that we have to make sure that all the pathogens are washed out, and our medium for doing that is water. If you don't have the water, then you need more distance between people. That's then the alternative that you have. But there are limits to what you can do with economic logic. You cannot turn it off, and therefore you cannot really enforce payment. You need to other ways to do that. And the final comment there is that if somebody doesn't pay their water bill, then they will also not pay their telephone bill, which in most countries is actually 3 to 7 times higher than the water bill. They also can't buy food, they can't buy shoes, they can't buy whatever they need. And instead of regarding people who can't pay their water bill as being cheating the system, free riding, I think we should understand that they are simply too poor to pay. And water is just the symptom where the others notice it. So there is this idea that there is water poverty. No, there isn't. There is poverty, and it affects water as well. Availability of water is down if you don't have the money to pay for it. But it's not a separate type of poverty. It is an aspect of poverty.
Thank you so much for this very, very enriching contribution. We really are grateful for all the information, the technicality of it, the politics of it. And it's also good that you interpelled our second speaker, so I give him the floor to react and to interact also.
Yes, thank you. I like the tough, provocative part. What I was saying is that there is a dilemma.
Yeah.
You know, when investors, private sector investors get in, and when states allow private sector investors to be the investors, and they give them a build-operate transfer, then we create not intended results from intentional actions. So, of course, they can stop it, because once you stop it, you create a triple bottom problems again. One thing which you raise, which makes sense, is water is sovereignty. It's a public good. People have to drink water. That's why, if you look at the history, even going through the deserts and villages, the wells were there. I mean, they were not locked. They just make sure that people, it was well protected, and people took the water they drank and they went. So water shouldn't be paid for. But again, somebody has to provide it. For next come next. You know, the German says that. Somebody has to pay for it, and that's why we have to rethink the whole aspect of water and poverty. I like the way you brought that topic, and people will just need to live. They need to be healthy. Once they get clean water, they're healthy, they have productivity increases, and the economy benefits and so on. And so the biggest challenge that we have now is encouraging states to remodernize in certain areas the infrastructures, because you're right, because if you turn the water off, and then so sometimes bacteria builds in the pipeline, and once you open it, the first people who gets the water, if they're not aware of the water, I mean, they get intoxicated, and of course, and that's the case. But we have to make sure that the water lost in certain areas where drinking water comes in, they have outdated piping system, some post-colonial in certain countries where those piping system has never changed. And the water is going out, but they have to change the infrastructure. So you are definitely right. But what young people have to understand is that the best place to make a career is in the water industry. I mean, AI will come, but it will never substitute technologies in the water industries. And everybody needs water. You know, if you are sick, there are medications, drink with water. There are two things: water, food, you eat if you are sick. And then you are almost dying. They said, please eat. Next thing, drink water. So this is a fundamental thing. AI would not stop you from eating and drinking water. So that's the best place to actually build career. And that's where we have to encourage a lot of innovations. We need to, again, I use this technical word, we need to make that area sexy. Unfortunately, great professors like you are going out, and the new ones that are coming, everybody's running in tech industries and techs, but this sector of water governance, governance and contractual system, we do not have a lot of young people that are getting in. They are doing serious management, but they are not getting in water management, engineering of water engineering. So we need to figure out a way where we attract and combine, and that is why I'm so happy that food security experts, sometimes when I look at Chris spent most of his life propagating food security today, food sovereignty, but now he has understood that it's not a moral appeal. You don't have to appeal to people. If people are hungry, they have to eat. That's fine, it's morally fine, but who pays for it? So we have to combine moral appeal and self-interest motives, political self-interest, economic self-interest, social self-interest. We have to build it. And Chris, I turn to you to say that even though you said we need a triangle of food security, water, and energy, I still believe that you need to make a diamond under it, that data. Because data is if you have data sovereignty, it plays a vital role. And the efficient use of this, of food security, where do we send the food after we have produced? Where do we send the water for production? How do we manage it? Where do we get the efficient energy? The key behind is information and data. So I think that we need to combine that triangle and we make it a diamond, make sure that data plays a vital role. And so I think that just coming back, you're right, poverty, water gives signals to the poverty levels in a country. And if we want to build sustainable societies where everybody wins, we need to make sure that we use water efficiently. We need to get the signals from those who cannot pay. We need to make sure that water as a public good stays as a public good. Because water today, everywhere you go, we have destroyed the ability to open your tap and drink because of the commercializations of bottled gas or no gas water and so on. So we have destroyed the God-given gift, and which makes sense. I mean, politicians are pushed not to propagate the ability of opening the tap water and drink, and some of us researchers are also coined to say water that comes out are not good, and you know better that one of the things that is being controlled are tap water. But the whole mind, there are kids that have been delivered in certain part of the world that have never tested tap water. And it make it in such a way that those infrastructure, the ability to invest in the open source, I call it open source water infrastructure, are not being done. So we need to, in mindset, continues to push water as a public goods and force the government to take its responsibility and make this water, especially for drinking, drinkable stuff, to be improved and propagated as drinkable water, so that the cost of buying bottles and commercialized water reduces, and you give more income to the domestic household to be able to use for other things.
Absolutely. Before giving you the floor, transition still. First of all, I'm so thankful for this wonderful panel, because you're moderating yourself. I love how you pick each other, you know, but you gradually, in the good sense. So I don't even need to make transitions, because you made it with your question, and that is the purpose of this conversation. It's really also about the panelists among themselves, stimulating each other and learning from each other. The second thing that is so important also is this depoliticization of water, but also the lobbying of water, I would say. Because as any issue that becomes scarce, markets dynamics starts playing, economic and financial stakes start emerging, interests and political pressure starts being around that. That's why I'm so happy we had researchers and we have scientific bodies that are here, that are becoming powerful and stronger, and that keep their independence. Because that's the best way to make sure that our policies and solutions are sustainable and also relevant to the needs. Now I'll let you, of course, react to Dr. Kennedy's simulation.
Well, thank you, Lamia, and Tumenta, thank you as well. First of all, I can't agree with you more. When you say we need reliable data, it's the same as saying we need reliable science. To me, it's a sine qua non. I mean, this is where we all, it's not my opinion that matters, it's not my religion, it's not my political ideology. No, we need scientific facts, we need data, and we need data that is available, not necessarily privatized. So this is where public investment in data systems is really very important. This is the kind of work that the consultative group on international agricultural research and others do. So yeah, I hardly agree. And I think some of the technology that is coming online, where we can measure soil moisture, we can measure consumption, we can measure from satellites exactly where the water is in this global water cycle. But what is perhaps missing from this conversation so far is the notion of global climate change. There is no more or less water yesterday than there is today or will be tomorrow, right? But how it's distributed is changing very quickly. And this is where for contingencies, right? That maybe 3 years ago, I remember reading in Abu Dhabi, there was 2 years worth of rain in one day, right? This kind of phenomenon where the upper jet stream, the Rossby waves are basically slowing down, and you're getting weather patterns basically parking over a specific geographic area and dumping all the water at once. Right? That is not manageable, it's not sustainable, and frankly, it's dangerous, and it's costing billions and billions of dollars to repair this damage. So this is where those long-term investments in water systems need to be thought out and planned and paid for very carefully, with the expectation that things are going to be changing. We cannot rely on the same patterns that we've been depending on. So another theme that I've been talking about in the two other panels is the idea of stress testing, right? Contingency planning, coming up, using the kind of data that is available to look at different scenarios, different potentialities, and plan for the future with policy officials, with academics, with business people, with farmers. This is super important, and it's not being done nearly enough. In Europe, yes. In Africa, no. I hope that will change. But yeah, there's some good examples. But we're living in a world where meat consumption is simply too high. And it's going up in China, in Europe, in Africa. The amount of fresh water consumed to produce a kilogram of beef is astronomical when you compare it with a kilogram of beans, for example. So if we don't change our diets, okay, and that's a responsibility for every single one of us. Do we need to eat meat 7 days a week? I would say definitely not. If you want to live on a sustainable planet, definitely not. So if we can keep that in mind, and I don't know about you, but I'm kind of getting tired of drinking my water out of plastic bottles, knowing that the microplastics from those bottles are going into my system, going into my food, going into everything we do. That's not good. We all know it, but yet what are we doing about it? So having the kind of food systems and water system planning based on science, based on credible metrics, that's the kind of stuff I hope some of you students are thinking about in your future careers. Thanks.
Thank you, Dr. Chris. You're creating a whole movement around students wherever you go, and I'm very supportive of that. Like the youth everywhere, every country and continent that you are really encouraging and supporting to be bold and to be responsible for their generation and the future. I'm also very happy to have students among us. If you agree, we would like to give the floor also and the opportunity for students to, and also, of course, all our audience, experts, all the people who are with us today. If you have any contribution, any question, please raise your hand and the microphone will be given to you. And we need to have at least one student. Yes, please.
Okay, let's make this a little bit more interactive. How many of you have at school or later on in college learned the art of interpolation? Interpolation. You have two measurements and you work out the line between them and you guess that whatever happens in between follows that line. Who has learned that at school? Nobody? Seriously, nobody? Okay, look it up. Interpolation and extrapolation, which is the trend analysis. We've seen that the temperature rises in our process, not of global warming. I hate that term. Climate change is also too mild. This is global overheating. We have analyzed the data from the past, whether that is temperature or sea level or whatever else, and we think that the future will be just an elongation of the past. That is extrapolation. It is the same art as interpolation, and I'm sure you've done that at school. You just don't dare you raise your hand because you're afraid that I, as a professor, would then ask you a follow-up question. So we have interpolation, we have extrapolation, we have trend analysis. Now, who of you has also at some point touched on exponential functions or logarithmic functions? Yeah, there you are. You will have, if you've done that, then you will have done interpolation beforehand. It just comes as steps in a process. So some have done that. Who has done extreme value analysis in statistics? Nobody. Unless there are statisticians in the room, nobody will have done that because it is something that is not being taught. But it needs to be taught. Because what we have when we predict the future of our weather patterns, of our rainfall, the distribution of rainfall, what we have is a statistics of extreme values, looking up at the sort of the signal. It rains, it doesn't rain, flood, drought. And that comes on the basis of an exponential function of temperature. With every degree that the atmosphere gets warmer, it carries 7% more water. Another degree centigrade, another 7% on top, on a mounting base. That becomes an exponential function. Our planning systems, our minds even, are not prepared to understand what is coming. And I encourage you all, look at how it works to analyze extreme values on the basis of an exponential trend. Because that is what you need to do in order to put those data into the right analysis and make the right predictions, develop the right scenarios to have the decisions that then build a resilient technical system or a resilient bioeconomic production system. Your agriculture, your forestry, your agroforestry will need to be resilient. And yes, agroforestry is more resilient than the open plow forestry, agriculture, and that is in areas that are closer to the equator, the only way to produce food in the long run. Having the soil exposed to the sun will not make sense anymore as the temperature of the atmosphere rises. The soil will become directly oxidized by the heat of the sun hitting the soil. You need vegetation cover in order to protect the organic matter in your soil. If you don't have that, you're going to lose it. So I encourage you to look at those mathematics and make the combinations. And perhaps that has encouraged some people to ask questions now.
Do you have questions or reaction? We're not going to force Dr. Chris. Oh, go ahead.
Il faut que j'essaie en français. Je pense que les gens, ils ne portent pas les micros, le traduction. On appelle ça quoi même? La traduction. Je pense qu'ils n'ont pas cet équipement pour comprendre. Mais ce qu'on vient de parler, c'est très très important pour nous.
En français, oui. Après, il y aura une question en français.
Oui, ça c'est. Non, oui. Oui, je pense que ce sujet qu'on vient de parler est très très important pour nous. Quand on parle de l'eau, tous les Marocains savent que la bonne gestion de l'eau au Maroc a fait le miracle de développement et de transformation du Maroc. Mais on a réussi de faire une combinaison à tous les niveaux, l'eau salinée. On a réussi d'utiliser ça dans le domaine de l'agriculture. Aujourd'hui, les gens sont peur pour savoir qu'est-ce qu'on va faire. Est-ce qu'on va continuer et comment est-ce qu'on peut bien utiliser l'eau dans le domaine de l'agriculture. Et ce qu'on vient de dire, c'est très très important qu'on ne peut pas séparer la souveraineté d'eau avec la souveraineté d'alimentation. Et moi-même, j'ai dit la souveraineté des données joue un très grand rôle pour nous. Et c'est très très important pour nous, ce que le professeur vient de nous dire, c'est très très important pour nous dire que les gens qui sont dans l'Afrique centrale, les pays de l'Afrique centrale, Congo, ce qu'on vient de constater, c'est que les gens ils coupent toutes les forêts pour faire l'agriculture. Mais ce que vous venez d'expliquer, c'est faire ça pendant 5 ans, 10 ans, mais quand le soleil tape sur le sol, ça devient très très difficile parce que la productivité va diminuer. Et ce que vous venez de dire là, ça change le don. Mais malheureusement, les gens qui ont besoin de ça ne connaissent même pas ça. Parce que au même moment, on essaye de parler de changement climatique, mais on n'adapte pas sur la productivité. La productivité, on doit trouver les nouveaux mécanismes, les nouveaux techniques pour aider les gens qui sont dans cette région pour savoir avec des arbres, on peut faire l'agriculture. Qu'est-ce que ça va se passer? Et ce scénario se passe sur 3 choses. L'eau, le sol et le demande au marché, quels sont les produits qu'on demande et on doit vendre où. Et je pense que ce que vous venez de dire, il faut qu'on réfléchisse, on fait une réflexion de gestion dans le système. Parce que jusqu'à aujourd'hui, on n'apprend pas des gens pour penser au système. Les gens pensent un peu, on ne pense pas dans le système, parce que ce que vous dites, l'écologie, c'est un système. Mais si je regarde ce que je veux manger, si je pars dans le supermarché pour manger, je regarde avec ce que j'ai, je vois les bouteilles plastiques, on me dit que c'est pas 3 dirhams, Et je vois les bouteilles cassables, comme il dit que c'est 15 dirhams. Moi, je veux me poser une question, jusqu'à quand je peux acheter à 15 dirhams? Et si nous sommes 7 personnes dans la maison, je veux réfléchir 2 fois. C'est pour ça qu'on doit réfléchir de cette réflexion de moralité et la capacité humaine d'adapter. L'économie, qui est notre comportement, la moralité, c'est qu'on veut bien faire, et la longévité, qui est la durabilité. Je pense que cette pensée, cette réflexion en système est très, très importante pour adapter tout ce qu'on vient de parler, parce que quand Chris parle de la même chose, mais on ne peut pas parler de la souveraineté, de l'alimentation, sans penser de la gestion de l'eau, sans penser de gestion de l'énergie. Mais ça, c'est une pensée de système. Et je pense que, je ne sais pas ce que vous pensez, mais je pense que cette formation qu'on pense dans le système est quelque chose qui est très, très limité. Et chacun regarde son parti. Je suis économiste, je regarde comment je peux optimiser le profit de mon entreprise. L'autre dit, non, je suis écologiste, comment est-ce que je peux protéger l'environnement? L'autre dit, non, je suis humaniste, je veux que les gens mangent, qu'ils ne meurent pas. Comment est-ce qu'on peut faire que la nourriture arrive? Je pense qu'on doit arriver à réfléchir dans le système. Pour moi, j'ai décidé de parler en français pour qu'on devienne interactif. Et en tant qu'étudiant, le premier don qu'on donne quand une étudiante doit apprendre, c'est pour poser la question.
Si on peut donner... Merci beaucoup d'avoir facilité ça. S'il vous plaît, devant la première ligne. Il ne marche pas. He drank too much water.
I'm so grateful for the quality of your insights, our panelists. My name is Mohammed. I'm international business coach. So my question is to Mr. Kennedy. It's about our continent, Africa. What do you think about the cold, les tiges, or comment on peut l'exprimer en français, malentendu, froid, entre l'Éthiopie et l'Égypte par rapport à la rivière du Nil, qui est une source primordiale pour 3 continents, pour 3 pays côte à côte de l'Afrique. Merci.
Merci, félicitations pour les membres du panel, pour leurs interventions inspirantes et très intéressantes. Pour moi-même, M. Mohammed j'étais au ministère marocain de l'énergie, des mines de l'eau et de l'environnement. J'ai eu le privilège de contribuer à la nouvelle stratégie de l'énergie et celle de l'eau du Maroc en 2009. Et parmi les composantes de cette stratégie, comme vous le savez, au Maroc, l'irrigation consomme 86% de l'eau consommée au Maroc. Bon, bien sûr, il y a la conversion vers l'irrigation localisée qui est préconisée, mais est-ce que vous avez une idée sur les autres manières de faire? Je sais que le choix des cultures est important, je sais que la digitalisation est importante pour l'irrigation. Est-ce que vous pouvez nous approfondir un petit peu cet aspect des choses? Et deuxièmement, quels sont les efforts qu'on peut faire en matière de décarbonation du secteur de l'eau et comment agir? Troisième question, alors je ne sais pas si vous avez la possibilité de répondre. Comme vous savez, la crise de l'eau est mondiale et elle doit être traitée en tant que telle. Et lorsqu'on voit l'ODD 6, eau et assainissement, nous savons tous qu'il faut multiplier par 4 les financements pour atteindre les objectifs de 2030. Et là, il y a une gouvernance qui est en cours de réforme au niveau international. Il y a eu une réunion gouvernementale à New York en 2023 pour justement réformer cette gouvernance. Une prochaine réunion intergouvernementale aura lieu en 2026. Alors nous pensons, enfin les participants à ces négociations, concertations, pensent à la mise en place d'un plan eau au niveau mondial, comme le climat, peut-être un accord eau, comme l'accord de climat pour le climat. Qu'est-ce que vous en pensez? Et bon, je sais que c'est une question très globale, politique, mais je crois que c'est important que tous les pays contribuent à la solution de cette crise mondiale et planétaire de l'eau. Merci.
React. And I would ask you also to make it maybe your closing remarks.
You want me to start?
Yes.
I'm not going to speak about the Nile. I'm going to leave that to you. I cannot really speak about the specific challenges of the Moroccan water strategy. But I would say to your last point, la crise de l'eau n'est pas mondiale. Elle est ubiquitaire. C'est autre chose. C'est toujours, ça existe partout, mais ce sont toujours des effets locaux. Ce n'est pas une logique mondiale comme le surchauffement climatique. Ça, c'est vraiment une crise globale parce qu'il y a une relation de cause et effet qui est mondiale. La crise de l'eau, les crises de l'eau en pluriel sont des crises ubiquitaires, mais qui sont différentes dans chaque place. Et ça, c'est, je crois, l'importance de développer les stratégies locales dans le bassin versant de rivières, autour des lacs, sur la base de nappes phréatiques, en respectant les écosystèmes naturels comme objet de collecte de données, développement des stratégies et décisions sur les investissements, tout le changement, l'usage du sol, du terroir, et aussi l'opération et le partage de l'eau et des bénéfices de l'eau entre les gens qui habitent dans ces régions qui ne sont pas des régions politiques. Voilà.
Merci beaucoup pour cette question. Je pense que c'est une question qui est très pertinente. Ça dépend à quelle perspective que vous êtes. Soudan est sur une lac phréatique, hein, c'est ça? Nappe phréatique, qui est très, le volume, je demande au professeur, est très important. On est capable aujourd'hui d'aller pour 200 km pour chercher le pétrole. Mais si on parfois, disons, 10 km, on va trouver l'eau qui va alimenter qui? Égypte, Tchad et le Soudan. Mais la question, c'est, comme vous avez bien dit, on ne doit pas penser trop en tant qu'humanité sur les difficultés qu'on a. On doit trouver quelles sont les possibilités que Dieu nous a données, avec notre créativité, avec science, quelle est la possibilité que Dieu nous a donnée de résoudre des problèmes. Comme le professeur a dit, L'eau, l'Éthiopie pense que l'eau là, il va développer les économies. L'Égypte a déjà développé. L'Égypte pense que c'est très très important pour que même si on doit utiliser cette eau, il faut qu'il y ait une gouvernance ensemble pour savoir combien de quantités qu'on utilise parce que, vous savez, c'est pas bien. Mais ce que je voulais dire, c'est on a l'eau en Afrique à tous les niveaux. Le Maroc, comme vous voyez, avec l'autoroute de l'eau, on a démontré qu'on peut captiver l'eau là où on veut. Si on a la volonté politique, si on a ce financement, et on doit trouver en tant qu'Africain de ne pas regarder un pays aujourd'hui seul. C'est pour ça que le roi Mohammed VI dit toujours que le Maroc n'est pas suffisant dès que l'Afrique en général n'est pas avec lui. Et pour nous, on doit amener cette idée en Afrique, une idée panafricaine. Dès qu'il y a des problèmes, on s'assoit ensemble. Et une chose qui peut nous aider, comme je sais que le professeur venait d'expliquer une chose qui est que les effets de l'eau sont domestiqués dans chaque pays, mais la problématique est partout. Mais chaque pays a cette problématique chez lui. Moi, je voulais dire que merci beaucoup. Les Africains ont utilisé les instances comme l'Union africaine, on peut résoudre des problèmes africains. Et cet exemple-là nous montre qu'on doit, en tant qu'Africains, travailler ensemble pour régler les problèmes de santé, pour régler les problèmes d'eau, pour qu'on puisse avoir une Afrique que chaque enfant peut vivre et aspirer de vivre en paix et tranquillité. Merci.
Let me just say thank you, Lamia. Appreciate the chance to be here and with my distinguished colleagues here. Thank you for spending your time with us. I would just like to summarize, perhaps, I like the concept brought up by Dr. Kramer about shared sovereignty. This conference, all of this conference has been, this theme of sovereignty has come up. And sovereignty means something different to me than it does to you. It's an ill-defined concept, but it generally means we have control, right? Control over our borders, control over our resources, right? If you're food sovereign, that means you can feed your own people, your own country. In this day and age, that is not possible, frankly. It's a nice thought. It motivates people ideologically and politically, but it's not practical and it's not possible. Water, you cannot rely upon anymore because of those weather changing patterns that I described. So managing water is the key to our future. That can be done, I think, in a very effective way when you approach food, energy, water together in that single nexus. It's not the only solution. There's lots of work that needs to be done, but we need to think and innovate differently the way we do policy. We can't focus on food without focusing on water. We can't focus on food without thinking of energy. So I think I mentioned the importance of planning for disasters. Stress testing our systems. That is something in Africa and African markets, I think, needs to become part of the muscle memory for policymakers, for businesses, for farmers, for academics, right? Because that cycle is disturbed. We as a human race don't seem competent or capable or willing enough to make the changes to reduce to what was agreed in Paris, the rising global temperatures, unfortunately. So what choice do we have? We need to prepare for the future crises that are coming. Overflooding, sécheresse, dryness. So we're capable of doing that. I think this is a good opportunity for all of us to be thinking about it, but acting individually, acting as a community, acting as a global community as well. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much. I couldn't have expected a better conclusion for that. We were able to show the intersectionality of power, politics, history, management, and of course water. But I like this panel because of the hope and the encouragement. It's possible, it's feasible, it's part of human nature, and I hope we will be surviving enough to see the fruits of this conversation coming through. Thank you all very much. Yes, we will have a picture, please, for commemorating this. Thank you very much.